Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Power Rangers deck building game from Renegade Games. Power Rangers is a 2 to 4 player deck building game, although I think it's primarily designed as a 1 versus 1 experience. You just have the opportunity to dive into it in teams. I have not played as teams for the record, or even the 3 player 1 versus 2 mode. I've only played this as a 1 versus 1, just so we're on the same page here. The game itself is a general deck building experience. If you're used to deck builders, it's going to have a lot of the same notes you're used to, as well as some things that make it stand out. You're going to have your hand of cards. Each player is going to have their own hand of cards, and this is an asymmetric deck builder, so you're going to have different sides, the Power Rangers versus the villains, and you're going to have different cards in the hand, although the starter hands are thematically different, but practically speaking the same. From there, you're going to be buying cards from a moving card row over here. You're going to have a card row with 5 cards. You have the opportunity to spend your shards effectively. You have these shards over here that you'll see on the left side of your card. Those little yellow shards are used to buy new cards, which will go into your discard pile. And then eventually, when you run out of cards, you'll shuffle, you start again, and before you know it, you now have 12 cards in your hand. Then you have 14 cards and 17 cards, and you're constantly expanding and building every single time you reshuffle your deck. The game is going to involve you utilizing your cards in ways in which you're going to attach them to your hero or villain, which is one of the interesting mechanics of the game. In addition to a card generally having its own effect, so for example, if we have disarm over here is going to generate either, and this is what you have to choose when the card comes into your deck a second time. When the card comes into your hand, you have to choose whether to use it for its ability or to use it for its shards or energy. But you can either generate shards to buy cards, energy to power cards, because some cards require a power cost on them, or you can choose to equip it and you'll be able to utilize it with your hero or villain by attaching the right color card to the sides of the person as you try to utilize their cards, because you can use those cards every single turn by paying in their energy cost for the card to get the ability. So it has most of the common deck builder stuff that you'd expect. You have a moving row of cards. Both players are building from that row. You're going to have your own starting deck of cards. Some of the areas where Power Rangers, the deck building game, is a bit different is, first of all, you're going to have different cards in the row that will either affect the villain or the hero, depending on what it shows on the bottom. So you can see one over here. You can see a bunch over here. Over here, you can see the yellow and purple cards will have different cards that negatively affect the person, and you could choose to pay to discard those cards, but if you don't, then you will receive the negative effect. The hero receiving their negative hero effects, the villain receiving their negative villain effects. So you have to be mindful as cards enter the card row, if or when they're bought, or if then they stay there, trying to ensure that they don't constantly ping you on health, or this or that, or any different kinds of effects on them, trying to ensure that they don't have negative effects again and again against you as on an recurring basis in the game. Past that, you're trying to build out your equipment. Again, cards have a variety of purposes, but you're trying to specifically find the equipment you need. And in general, with the Power Rangers, you're going to have them flip. When all 4 slots are filled, attach your Zord to the Zord bay. That's going to be your Zords over here that go here. The villain has their Masters that are going to be powering up with their Masters, and the heroes have their Zords that will be powering up in the Zord bay. But you're also going to go ahead and flip your card, and that gives you your own special abilities that's going to be in play, which is in play either way. You're going to have your specific characters you utilize with their abilities, but then you'll flip and power them up. As you slowly build out your Power Ranger, equipping the various items to them, you have the opportunity to discard those, so it's not locked in. You can go ahead and have Alpha 5 attached to your Power Ranger, but then as a better yellow card comes out that might be a better fit for your style, if there is a better yellow card somewhere over here, as we get Zordon over here, which might be a better fit for you, you can choose to attach that instead. And so it is modular in the sense that you'll be upgrading your cards in different ways, trying to figure out the best combination of cards where you have a nice, compact, tight deck that you can keep generating energy you need to be able to activate as many of the powers as you can to constantly cycle your opponent's health down to 0. That's basically the game. It has your classic deck building concepts in it, your own starting hand deck, your card row that you're building from, a variable card row. It's asymmetric in the sense that both sides are different, having slightly different between the Zords and the Masters, and the cards that they can most easily utilize in their deck, and the colors you're going to be powering up with versus using them for their pure energy costs and whatnot. You can see over here, this card over here is generating 8 energy, which is tremendously huge, or you can alternatively try to use it for its power, putting onto its Morphin Time, where you can then spend 6 energy to gain a non-adversary card from the grid. So you're trying to figure out the combination of powers and abilities that you'll be utilizing, and that is basically Power Rangers, the deck building game. Which brings me to our review, starting off with ease of play. The game itself, for the most part, is fairly easy to understand. The general game sequencing, again, if you've played a deck builder, it's all the same common things. And even the asymmetric aspects of the game aren't that complicated. There's a little bit to manage as far as the Zords and the Masters and some of the edge case cards over there, but for the most part, this follows a fairly similar standard deck building concept. It doesn't reinvent that much. It does give you that whole equipment aspect, which is something to learn and to take into account, but it's really not that hard to actually learn. And game time generally runs around 45 minutes. You could have some games that drag. We'll cover this in the cons, but some games can drag, especially if you're focusing on constantly healing. If you have one player dealing damage, other player healing, the game can get into a bit of a cycle of of getting a little longer than the game should ideally be. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like with the equipment system. The system you have where you can equip your heroes and try to build out a hero that is custom to the cards that's there, it's both a pro and a con. It's a pro in the sense that you're able to kind of build out your hero as you play, which gives you a feeling of tableau building, and it also has that variableness where you can shift things in play, but it's also a bit of a con because you end up focusing very heavily. In a game that's just full of deck building game with tons of cards, you do end up kind of prioritizing a certain smaller batch of cards again and again. You kind of really hone in and focus on those, using a lot more of the cards for energy or other effects, and so there is a bit of a pro and con there. I think overall a pro though. I like the equipment system. It's one of the ways that makes Power Rangers stick out, which is important. Deck builders at the end of the day, there are a dime a dozen, there are a million of them, and you kind of do want to bring something to the table past the shiny IP of Power Rangers, and they bring that with the equipment system, as well as the Zords and the Masters. So they do bring something new to the genre that gives you interesting decision space around what you're doing. And that sense of powering up is very present, both between your Power Ranger getting more equipment, between them flipping, between getting Zords and Masters, between having more stuff going on. You will be powering up. The game's going to start with you doing a damage here and a damage there and barely ever getting anything done, but by the time you get to the mid or late game, you'll be able to buy a lot more cards, do a lot more damage, and really just socking it to each other again and again. So that sense of escalation, that sense of powering up is very present, and there's good decision space around how and when to play cards, for the most part. Not necessarily buying cards, we'll come back to that, but as far as playing cards, there is good decision space around when to use cards for as resources on the side, when to use cards to be able to slot into your board and start taking people down. There is that trade-off of when to kind of cash in on your engine. There are good decisions to be made as far as hard decisions to be made as far as when and where to utilize cards in this game. As far as what I don't like, the decisions around playing the cards I liked, the decisions around deck building suffer from the same thing it generally has for me whenever you have a card row in a deck building game. I'm somebody who tends to prefer static card markets, the kind of thing you'll find in Dominion, and variable card rows I find a little less exciting. And the reasoning being that in a static card market, you generally have a high degree of knowledge as to what's available from the beginning, and you generally have more cards that you can buy. Versus in a variable card row that's constantly rotating, you have fewer card choices, and to that end, I find often the decision space around what to buy, especially when you have that dynamic aspect of the different sides having different strengths or different cards that they want, gives you even more of a focus as to like limiting in to a handful of cards. I rarely felt there were really interesting decisions to be made as far as which cards to gather, which cards will be best in my engine. For the most part, it's, hey, this card's the right card, I'm going to go ahead and buy it. It's not a bad thing, it's just, again, to me, this is a problem more with the variable card row in general, not specifically to Power Rangers, but present in Power Rangers. Also, I kind of touched upon it already, but the game can vary drastically in length. You can have games that go by fairly quickly, even like 30, maybe 35 minutes, but if you have a lot of healing in the game can really start to drag. If you have a player who focuses on healing cards and starts leveling themselves up in terms of just constantly keeping themselves buffed, the game can start dragging very quickly. You'll have to get to a point where you can kind of escalate in power to the point that you can do enough damage to take them down, or alternatively, they eventually take you down. But I do find the healing in the game, while a good thing, because I like the sense of not being certain how things will play out. I like the fact that there is healing in the game. I think that might arguably be a bit too much. You could have games that run a little longer than I would like because of it. As far as I can see others not liking, this one's a hard one to say because I never like talking about balance in reviews, because I feel that when you play a game, a handful of times and you talk about balance versus playing a game with a designer or publisher or playtesters who may have played this game 30, 40 times, I will say in our games, it does seem that the Power Rangers are overpowered. I don't know if that's just us. I don't know if we're doing something wrong. I don't know. It seems the Power Rangers are overpowered. They've won every single game we've played of this. I don't know. Maybe it's not an issue. I'll say that. I'm putting this thing in what I can see others not liking primarily because I don't know if it's in a big enough gap that I'm willing to clearly say, hey, this game isn't even fun. The game is fun. I've gone through the game multiple times. It is close whenever you play. It is close enough, I should say. It's close enough. It's not close. It's close enough that it's an enjoyable experience, but it does seem the Power Rangers do have the upper hand. I would need a lot more place to that confidently, so I'm just saying that as a bit of a placeholder potential. As far as final thoughts on Power Rangers deck building game, I enjoy this one with the giant but. And the giant but is that I think this game is good. I think Power Rangers is good. I think it is a good deck builder game that takes the core concept and it mixes it up a little with the equipment and the Zords and the Masters. Overall good. But that's where it kind of caps out for me. To me, this isn't great. This isn't amazing, and combined with the fact that I personally am not a fan of the IP. I'm not against the IP, but I have no affinity for the Power Rangers IP, means I'm faced with a game which has an IP that I don't particularly care for, and it does different things, but not necessarily enough different things to really pull me in and capture my attention. I think if you are a fan of the Power Rangers IP, I think this is a good game that you'll enjoy. I think that if you're not a fan of the Power Rangers IP, I think there are other deck builders I would recommend over it. For me, it's a 3.5 out of 5. Enjoyable, good, not necessarily amazing. As far as those other game recommendations, first of all, if you're a Power Rangers fan, if you're looking for more Power Rangers stuff, I highly recommend Heroes of the Grid. Heroes of the Grid is a great skirmish game that gives you a cooperative, not really a skirmish game. It's a tower defense kind of game. It's a game with miniatures and waves of enemies approaching you as you try to tactically navigate them with some really elegant card play. A very solid game. And if you're looking for a different asymmetric deck builder with a totally different theme, Undaunted Normandy will give you completely differently asymmetric deck building with a degree of skirmish mixed in a way. Any of the Undaunted series, Undaunted Normandy, Undaunted Great Britain, Undaunted Stalingrad, any of the Undaunted series will give you a high degree of asymmetric deck building if that's the thing that appealed to you here. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.